Yes, so as Jamie said, we're going to talk about people. We've got some vocabulary related to people, and we're also going to do some strategies for the speaking, okay? So a very common topic, particularly in the part 1 and the part 3, is to talk about people you know, to talk about relationships, and in the part 2 is to describe somebody you know. And you know, even whatever the topic is, you can use the same kind of vocabulary. So we're looking a lot at adjectives to describe character and to describe personality. Okay. So first of all, we're going to look at part 1. So we're going to look at an aspect of each of the 3 different parts of the speaking, okay? So if you remember with the speaking part 1, at the beginning, there's a little introduction where the examiner is going to ask you some questions, just, you know, and ask to see your ID. And then they will ask you questions on 3 sets of topics. The first one will always be job or where you live, okay? And then 2 other subjects, all about yourself, familiar subjects, could be hobbies, could be family, things like that, okay? And altogether it is 5 minutes maximum, okay? And again, could be very common to be asked about the people in your life. So we're going to look at some different people that you might be asked about and some of the vocabulary related to that, okay? So if you look at that first picture, what can you see there? Okay, yeah, so it's family. What kind of vocabulary do you know related to family? I think you need to change your keyboard, Ali. It's okay, close-knit, very nice. Siblings, family gatherings, loved ones, okay, get together. Okay, maybe a family reunion. Okay, yeah, it's sunny, that's very true. Okay, bond, extended family, that's very good, yeah. Okay, they're taking a selfie, that's exactly right. Okay, what about this relationship? What are we looking at here? Okay, yeah, so friends, possibly sisters. Let's go with friends. What kinds of things? Okay, yes, best friends forever, close friends. Any other words you can use? Soulmate, Olga, very nice. I like that, yeah. Okay, besties, very good, Neo, some great language coming out here. Okay, well, maybe they're siblings. Okay, what about this one here? Okay. What kind of relationship? Okay, colleagues, good. Any other words? Yeah, co-workers, very nice. Okay, that's good. Team leader. Not quite sure what the, she is a pregnant teacher, yes. Okay, crash course, very good, Saban, maybe that, brainstorming, something like that, okay. And what about the last picture? What are we looking at in the last picture? Okay, good, neighbors. Yeah, relationships is a party house, yes. Noisy neighbors. Any other words you can think of related to neighbors or neighborhoods? Gal pals, that's quite good. Okay, very good. Okay, party in the house. All right, so those are some of the different types of people that you might be asked to talk about in the part 1, remember, okay? So what kinds of questions, it's always quite good to try and predict the kinds of questions that you might be asked, okay? So if we think about family, what kinds of questions do you think the examiner might ask you about family in part 1? Okay, could be describe your family. Yes, okay, how many siblings do you have? Okay, how close are you? Or describe someone in your family, maybe in the part 2. Exactly, yes. Okay, and your immediate family, very nice, Ola, that's some good vocabulary there. Do you come from a big family or a small family? That's a very common question. Okay. What about friends? What kinds of questions might you be asked about friends? Okay, yes. Talk about your best friend. Who's your best friend? Yes. Have you got good friends? Okay. How do they help you? That's very nice. Yeah. Are you closely with your friends? Okay. Oops, sorry. What about colleagues? What kind of questions might you ask about colleagues? Oh, how good are you at making friends, Srinath? That's a very nice one. Okay, and how do you support each other? How do you get along? Very good. Okay, what about colleagues? Who's your favorite colleague? Okay, who's the best person you've worked with, Stacey? That's very nice. I like that. Or a personality of your colleague. Okay. And how about neighbors? What kind of questions might there be related to neighbors? Okay. Cozy neighbors? I'm not sure that that's a bit personal. How do you get along with your neighbors? How well do you know your neighbors? Those kind of things. Yeah, that could work very well. So always good to try and think about the kinds of questions that the examiner might ask you. Okay. So let's just keep going. So now we're going to look at the vocabulary. So what kinds of adjectives you might use to describe people. And remember in the part 2 that whatever kind of question they ask, if it's about a person, you're going to be using these kinds of adjectives. So you have a wide range of possibilities of these coming up. Okay. So have a look at that first picture. Can you think of some, yeah, brave, Mustafa, what adjectives, or reckless? Again, we're looking at that positive and negative connotation, if anybody was there last week. Okay, adventurous, thrill seeker, daredevil, Varun, that's great. Okay, confident. Okay, extreme suicidal, Julie, yeah, a bit more on the negative side, stupid maybe. Okay, what about the next one? Let's think about the grandfather in this picture. So, yeah, caring, yes, bonding, okay. Oh, crazy, I think we're on the last one. Lovable or sweet, supportive, very nice. Yeah, we've got some good words coming up here. Okay, rejoicing, Rohan, very nice. Okay. And what about the next one? Oh, devoted, Varun, that's very nice. And somebody else put devoted. Okay, studious, very nice. Bookworm, diligent, nurturing, drunkard. I'm not quite sure where that one came in. Motivated, okay, very good. Yeah, determined, focused, disciplined. There's some great words coming up here. Maybe workaholic, that could be, we're a big nerd. So again, we've got some positive or negative ones there. And what about the last person? Okay, very nice, creative, artistic, very good words, guys. Talented. Okay, he's also very focused, very concentrated. Yeah, skillful, very good. Okay. So we've got some words here. So I want you to tell me which picture they belong to. Oh, flair for painting, Shraddha, very nice. So just say A, B, C, or D, okay? So what about creative? Yeah, okay, definitely D. A lot of you already said that one. Adventurous would be A, yes, absolutely. Supportive. Okay, very good. B. I think this one came up. Conscientious. Okay, yes. C, definitely. Like studious. Some of you put studious. Conscientious is a nice word to use as well. Considerate. Okay, good. I think B. And what about sporty? Okay, very good, guys. Okay, reliable. Yeah, I think the grandfather was probably the right one too. Ambitious. Okay, it could be quite a few of them actually, couldn't it? Probably not B, but yes, it could definitely be A or C. Artistic. Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely D. How about patient? Yeah, again, B or C. I think probably you've got a couple of options there. Generous. Yeah, probably B. If someone is generous with their time, I think that would work very well. Okay. Talented. Yeah, D, and yeah, I think possibly A as well. Yeah. Okay, how about confident? Yes, I think that's probably A. Okay, good. So try and get a really good range of high-level adjectives that you can use to describe people. It's very likely that you'll use them at some point during your speaking test. Okay, so we have all of those words up there. Okay, so thinking a bit more about the kinds of questions that you might be asked. I think somebody put that one in the chat. So who are you closest to in your family? So imagine if that was the question, and then what qualities do they have? So yeah, so what would you say? You don't have to use these ones. Can you give me the person in your family you're closest to and the 3 adjectives all together? Because otherwise it's going to separate out. It's not going to be easy to understand. Okay, selfless love, Shraddha, that's very nice. Wise, okay. Most of them are mum or dad, yeah. Okay, very nice. My mother, artistic, reliable. I missed that one. Going very, very quickly. Unconditional love is a very nice word to use. Caring, supportive, wise. Okay, some great words coming up here. A good listener, Clarice. That's very good. Okay. Okay, dad is strict. Okay, yeah, that's also very possible. Okay. So this is a possible answer. You know, in my family, I'm probably closest to my brother. Always nice to use these they're like linking phrases, but we use them in the speaking, like probably, definitely. They work basically. They're very nice ways to add something else into your speaking. It's very natural. And it just makes it that, you know, much better than, you know, without using those kinds of words. Okay, and a little bit extra information. So we've got 3 sentences there, which is always great for a kind of a part 1 answer. Okay. Oh, very nice, Ivan. You got a shoulder to cry on. That's excellent. Okay, supportive, reliable, and creative. Okay, they might actually ask you to describe yourself. So if you had to describe yourself, what 3 adjectives would you use and why? Or maybe just 1 adjective and why you think. Okay, gorgeous, Rodis, very humble as well, perhaps. Okay, remember you've got to explain why as well. Okay, but I mean, there's some great words, but remember, you got to have the reason. Give me a reason why you believe that about yourself. Okay, we're getting a lot of adjectives. We're not getting many reasons to support it. Generous, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. That's excellent. Okay, good. I'm good at joking. Okay, now we're getting some reasons. That's good. Okay. Got my mum's genes, very nice. Always hoping for the best. Okay, good. So remember, always, you know, back up what you say with a bit more. Oh, very nice, Braulio. Neutral, try and mediate in conflicts. I think that's very good. Okay, good, good. So always give a reason, yeah? And, you know, I'm quite adventurous, sporty, but maybe a bit inconsiderate and impatient. So you might want to have some positives and some negatives as well. Okay, good. The middle child, so I learned to compromise early. Very nice. I like that one very much. Okay, good. Okay, so that's describing people, but you often have to describe relationships. And particularly in the part 2, you're asked to describe a person and your relationship to them. So let's think about some of these. So we've got a couple of very different relationships here. So to say top or bottom, in which picture are they getting on well? Okay, we'll go for a top. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so they're getting on well, they have a good relationship. If they've fallen out, then which ones? Then that's the bottom one. Okay, so just very general ones, getting on well or fallen out. So we have a lot of phrasal verbs to talk about relationships. And again, phrasal verbs, very, very good for the speaking. You don't want to use them in the writing. They might be playing Monopoly, a board game, Scrabble. But really, really good to use these relationship phrasal verbs in the speaking. Okay, so can you think of any other expressions to describe relationships? Like get on well, fall out, okay, get along, okay, that's good. Thinking about maybe the verbs as well. Oh, toxic relationship, okay, that's very good, okay. Get along like two peas, partners in crime, okay, very nice. Any other, yeah, there's only one speaking, by the way, just for that question. It's exactly the same for academic and general training, and you want to be using informal language. Okay, on the same wavelength, other way around, Ali, but good expression, on the same wavelength. Okay, supporting, fighting like cats and dogs, we talked about that one before, didn't we? Okay, falling apart. Okay, so let's look at some more common but good informal expressions to use to talk about relationships. Okay, so I'm going to put up the expression, but I want you to tell me, can you use this with friends only, with partners only, or in both cases? Okay. Yeah, you can just write FPB, Othmani. Yes, absolutely. So if you say that you get on well with each other, is that an F, a P, or a B? Yes, it's a B. Okay. You can use that to talk about your friend. You can also use that to talk about your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, however you want. Okay, so it's definitely both. Okay, if it was love at first sight, okay, yeah, no, that's definitely only your partner, okay? That's not something you would use to talk about a friend. Okay, if you enjoy someone's company, yeah, you could use that to talk about both, yeah, both friends and partners. And if you say you have a lot in common, okay, yeah, again, we have both. We've got a few A's in there. I'm not quite sure what A relates to. So yeah, you can use that to talk about both. Okay, we hit it off right away. Okay, yeah, so you can use that. You can talk about that with either a friend or someone you go on to fall in love with. It works in both cases. Okay, what about going out? Hit it off means that you just like instantly get on well, you know, instantly talking comfortably with each other, no awkwardness. It's like you've been friends for a long time. Okay, so going out is only with your partner. Okay, or we've been together for 5 years. Okay, yes, again, it's only that kind of relationship where you can use that expression. And how about we get on like a house on fire? It's not really something you use to talk about that kind of relationship of partner, girlfriend, boyfriend. It's more like a friendship one, okay? Yeah, I don't know what the N is for. Okay, so good range of expressions there, very natural, very informal expressions. You mean the last one, the house on fire? Okay, just a minute. So very natural expressions to use in the speaking. They're all, you know, colloquial or slang expressions. If you say you get on like a house on fire, it's almost the opposite of what it sounds like. It means that you get on really, really well. Okay, so you have a great friendship, instantly a great friendship. So a bit like hit it off. Okay, yeah, you're in the zone. Okay, so just get on very, very well together. Okay, but tend to use it with friends rather than partners. Okay. So let's have a look at talking about friends and family. So these are some of the common questions that you might be asked. And we're looking at giving those good, full answers, okay? Those complete answers that the examiner is looking for, okay? So if someone said, the examiner says, do you prefer spending time with friends or family? Maybe you just say, no, I prefer spending time with my family. Is that a good answer? No, no, definitely not. Okay, far too short. So even when it's a very simple question, you need to give those, yeah, you need to elaborate exactly. You need to give reasons, you need to expand on your answer, okay? Or develop your answer. So we're looking for a well-developed answer. Okay, and there's a good mnemonic that you can remember to use to think, to add more information. Okay, yeah, so exactly, Jabbar, reasons are one of it. So you answer the question, okay, and we want to use linking phrases. We just don't want to use the same linking phrases that you have in the writing, okay? Very important to use natural speaking linking phrases, okay? So for example, to tell you the truth, and then he's going to choose family, okay? Then you follow that up with a reason, okay? Yeah, maybe I don't have to think, okay? A lot of time. So because, for example, maybe I'm very busy at work today, okay? So answer the question, give a reason, then give an example. Always works to give an example. So what you might do together when you're with your family. Yeah, they are forever, Braulio. That's very nice. And friends come and go. That's a nice way of thinking about it. So, okay, good. We've got some very nice, well-developed answers coming up here in the chat with some really good language, okay? We can also give an alternative, okay? So talking about the week, the evenings, and then talking about the weekend. So that gives you a chance to use two different expressions there. Okay. Oh, Rishab, moral support. That's a very nice expression to use. Okay. Or quality time. Okay. And then summarize. Okay. So that's how I like to spend my free time. It's just a nice way of rounding it off. It also tells the examiner that you've finished, you know, what your answer, so they know they can then move on and you don't end kind of in an odd way, okay? So, and again, you can see there, that's, you know, like 3 sentences, quite complex sentences, and we've got some good expressions there to talk about different relationships that you have, okay? Another one, I think this came up actually at the beginning. Who is your best friend? John. Okay, obviously not giving the examiner any language to work with, any language to, yes, really not helping the examiner to give you a good score, okay? So again, we can use the same way of answering, the same mnemonic, okay? So answer the question. Okay, so again, using a linking phrase, okay, like actually, Galaxy A10, that's a good way. My imaginary friend, yes. You can say, well, I'd say that. Very nice, very natural, to be honest, yeah, that's fine. He's not good looking, but he's open-minded, okay, that's very good. Okay, so the reason for that, had this relationship for a long time, friends since childhood, okay. Okay, still in close contact. Got some very good answers coming up here. Okay, so regularly catch up. Again, you're using these kinds of informal language, okay. Okay, that's very nice as well, Varun. I've got many friends, but the one who's my best friend. Okay, all the ups and downs in my life. Rishab, very nice. We've really got some very good language coming up here. Okay, and then again, some more information. So adding something else, planning to go and see him. And then again, just round it up with something like that. So that's who I consider my best friend. So you're just kind of putting a full stop to your answer, but in a nice way, and then the examiner will move on. But you can see again, you know, we've got 4 sentences, complex sentences, definitely a complete answer, a well-developed answer, okay? And we've also got some of these phrasal verbs. So we've got kept in touch, we've got catch up. So remember, they're very, very useful in terms of the relationships, the phrasal verbs, okay? So one more, so qualities, again, very, very common question. Qualities in a friend, qualities in a teacher, qualities in a student, same kind of thing. So again, we could say honest and reliable, not really good enough, not giving the examiner enough to talk about. Okay, so again, use this areas, works very, very well. Okay, so they're asking you what you think. So start with a linking phrase for giving an opinion. Okay, so, okay, that's our key information, honest and reliable, but we need to put something around that. Okay, the reason. Okay, you have to be able to trust your friends. Okay, all right, good. Okay, someone's always been there, Cara. That's very nice. That's a really good way of doing it. Friend in need is a friend indeed. Yeah. Okay, so for instance, another option in terms of giving an example. Okay, so you need something or someone to talk to. They'll always be there for you. So there we go. We have the same expression that you had up there. Okay, and then again, those are the qualities I look for. So again, you're just putting something nice and simple at the end, which tells the examiner, you know, you're done. Okay. And again, 3 sentences, complex sentences, and there's a logical flow there. It makes sense all the way through. Okay. So do try and remember that the areas works in part 1 and it also works in part 3 when you're giving your abstract answers, because it's just a way of developing your answer in a very clear and a very logical way. Okay. So now we're going to move on to part 2 and having a look at a bit of a plan there. So possibly you've seen this one on the website. Describe a person who influenced you as a child. Very, very common part 2 to ask you to talk about the person, young person, old friend, member of your family, teacher, many, many different examples, okay? And then you have your bullet points on the card that are there to help you, but do remember that this is not a task that you have to answer. The bullet points are only there to help you. You don't have to follow them. To be honest, that's actually not going to give you enough information to last for 2 minutes. But you can use those as a basis to start planning your talk. Okay. So remember, you've got to speak for 2 minutes and you want it to flow. You want it to make sense. You don't want to come back and start repeating yourself, which happens a lot of time because people run out of ideas, so they just go back and say the same thing again. Okay. So how do we plan? Any ideas? What are the different ways you can plan your talk when you have that 1 minute preparation time? What are you going to do in your 1 minute preparation time? Okay, how are you going to make notes? Okay, you're going to have different points. Okay, yeah, so keywords works very, very well. Yeah, brainstorm ideas, get some adjectives down. Okay, good. Okay, so one way to do it, which usually helps very well, is using those bullet points, but keywords, as you said, okay? So use those as headings. So you can use headings or mind map. Somebody put mind map up, sorry, your name's just disappeared up at the top. That's a really good way of doing it as well. But any way that you're dividing up your answer into different sections, so you can speak about each section in turn, and then you won't go back on yourself, you won't repeat yourself, and it will make sense, okay? So if this was our idea, so who would you have as your person who influenced you? Who had the greatest influence on you when you were a child? Okay, your dad, so a lot of family members here as well, different members of the family, okay, good. So we've gone for my father as one example. And then the kind of person, so how would you describe the person that you just put up as the person? Okay, strict is very good, ethical, supportive, very nice. So we've got lots of good adjectives there. Okay, so we're going to go for hardworking, but with a good sense of humor. Okay, so we've got a bit of a contrast there. Okay, kind-hearted, Christabel, that's very nice. And then what might you put to talk about the relationship that you have with this person? Okay, they have a lot of wisdom, that's good. Okay, close, that you're close. Yeah, friendly relationship. Okay. Maybe you could put some of the things that you did together. That's usually quite a nice way. So, you know, it's not just a way of describing the relationship, but then you need to go on to talk about. So, for example, we're talking about that you used to go for walks in the countryside. Okay. You can talk about the physical looks as well. That's a great thing to do. That's definitely going to give you more information. It's also a set topic, so it works very well. You can say, let me tell you what he looks like. And then you can use lots of really good adjectives to describe physical appearance. So that's fine. Remember, the bullet points are just there to help you. You don't have to follow them strictly, okay? Oh, I like this, I'm all gossiping about my elder sister with my mum. Yeah, so think about, you know, hobbies you had together or activities that you did together, because you can talk a lot about something like that. Then the influence, in what way would you say this person influenced you? Okay, so here's someone who's very cool. You can do both, Shraddha, yeah? I mean, the more you add in, the more detail you have, the better it is. Okay, not to be beaten down by life, that's very good. Okay, pushing you to be the best. Okay, some great things, how to be optimistic. Okay, good. So just a few keywords that you can then develop, but you remember you need to talk about these things in detail. Okay, very, very important. Otherwise, you're not going to make the 2 minutes. Okay. So then here we have a way of doing it. So remember, always introduce, always use the linking phrases to give you information. Okay, so again, start with who, but then explain why, just introducing that idea. And then let me tell you a little bit about him. So immediately, you know, it's an introduction to giving some more information about him. So these kind of introductory phrases or words work very well to keep the examiner in line with what you're saying so they don't get lost. Okay. So then we just put these ideas into a full sentence. Then we've got a nice sentence structure, what I admire most about him. So that works very well. And some very good language like sacrifices, raise me and my siblings. Okay. Then you can talk about what you used to do. Okay, so again, we've got then different tenses that you're using, still in complex sentences. You would tell me, so that's a very nice tense to use to talk about regular activities in the past. Okay. And then going on to explain what the influence was. Okay, obviously this is a shortened version because we just really don't have time to write out a whole 2 minutes worth of answers. But the point here is introducing each of those sections very clearly so that the examiner can follow what you're saying very, very well, okay? Remember, the first marking criteria for the speaking is fluency and coherence. Coherence is very, very important, okay? And it's one of the things that the examiner, you know, remembers most at the end of the test. They might not remember every grammar mistake you made, but they are certainly going to remember if it was difficult to follow your answers or if it was really easy to follow your answers. Okay. All right. And finally, final influence from there. Okay. So very important to use linking phrases. Okay. And then we're going to move on to part 3. So we've looked at all 3 parts. So in part 3, remember, you're being asked abstract questions. You're not being asked about personal things, but you can often be asked about your culture or your country. Okay. I'll go back to the slides at the end. Okay. And then you can see those. So here you're going to be asked maybe about nationalities or cultures rather than about individuals. Okay. So often we can talk about stereotypes. So you can talk about the stereotype and then you can just go through it, or you can say, I agree with this, or I disagree with this. So we're going to look at some relevant ones for myself and Jamie first, and then we'll look at everybody else's. So have a look at these flags. What's that the flag for? UK. Well, England, yes, England specifically. It's not the same thing. Yeah, almost Switzerland, but you're the wrong way around. Yeah. Okay, what about this one? Scotland, very good. Oh, Greece, maybe. Finland. Okay, you got the colours, but no, this is definitely Scotland. You're doing very well. And the last one is Australia. Yes, very, very good. So if you think about English people, what's the stereotype of, what's a typical English person like? T. First one that came up was T. Polite, thank you very much. Sarcastic, yes. They love beer and they're jolly. Fair, tall and blonde. Well, maybe, okay. Oh, noble, I like that. Polite, distant, elegant. Okay, I'm not sure about the elegant, but boring cars. Frank. Okay, what about Scottish people? Scotch. Whiskey and skirts, Jamie. Alcohol, strong accent, skirts. We love the skirts. You're going to have trouble when Jamie unmutes himself. Scottish cat. Okay, oh, Piper. Okay, right. Incomprehensible English. Okay, Craig Ferguson. Very nice. Okay, Braveheart. Yeah. Okay, how about Australians? Kangaroos and reptiles. The people, guys, the people, not the no idea. Okay, that's fair. How would you describe the people? Okay, very nice. They ban everything. Okay, yeah, open, yeah, good sense of humor. I think that's primitive. Okay, so these are so kind of ways you can put it is English people are supposed to. Great expression to use to be giving a generalization or a stereotype. Ooh, cricket, very good. So they're supposed to have good manners, but apparently we don't. So you can then contrast the stereotype with what you think is actually true, okay? And then another one, have a reputation for being. So Scottish people have a reputation for being stingy. What does stingy mean? Saving up. What does stingy mean? Yeah, oh, tight-fisted, Ola, very good. Yeah, okay. Stingy, don't like spending money. Okay, okay, very good. But that's almost certainly not true. Okay, oh, very good. Ennis has got a whole thesaurus there for stingy. Okay, parsimonious, very good. Okay, and Australians are famous for being laid back. Good adjective to use, laid back and relaxed. Okay, but it's a generalization, so obviously it's not true for everybody. So you've got some good expressions. Oh, we don't talk about the Welsh, but you got some good expressions there for giving generalizations and then contrasting with the farms. Sheep. Okay, so that's all about us and Australia. What about your own stereotypes? What are the stereotypes of your country? Okay, friendly. You can give us one positive and one negative, maybe. We can do that. Pasta. Okay, spicy. Good. Kenyans run very fast. Yeah, okay, I think that's probably something that people would. Snoopy foodies. Okay, Brazil, messy, warm, communicative. I like that, Clarice. I think that really sums it up quite well. Friendly and laid back. Okay, very nice one. You have Indians are poor, but not really. Good. So you're killing the stereotype. Okay, you do need to put your country up as well, guys, because otherwise it doesn't really mean anything. Harder and caring. Bears on the road. Okay. Oh, Philippines resilient. That's very nice. Okay, good. Some hospital. Okay, good. So remember to try and use those kind of expressions if this comes up. Oh, grumpy, really? Where are you from, Pauline? Who thinks people are grumpy? Not going to have? No, I don't know. Pauline, no. Okay, so let's take some questions.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much, Annelie. Thanks for that presentation. I've just managed to unmute myself because my screen has been freezing for the last few minutes. I think the session's very busy today. So excellent. Thank you guys as well for joining us, for providing so many good answers there, some really great vocabulary. So well done. I have been busy during Annelie's presentation helping to answer some of your questions in the Q&A. There are quite a few more questions in there at the moment, so we'll discuss them in a minute. If you do have any general questions about IELTS or more specific questions about what we've covered today, you can add them to the Q&A and we'll discuss them in a moment. Before we do that, though, I would just like to do a bit of promotion for our premium services, which we offer on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. We offer a speaking and writing evaluation service where you can book a face-to-face session via Zoom with one of our qualified speaking examiners, and we'll go through a full mock speaking test with you. And after the test, we can give you feedback on your performance, an estimated band score, any areas of strength or weakness that you have, and most importantly, what you can do to improve your speaking. So we'll also write a report for you and send you all that information after the test. So if you're interested in that, we offer that on our website. I've put the link in the chat, so please feel free to check that out. We also have a series of video lessons on reading and listening. So if you're interested in improving your reading or listening, you can check out the video course. It's called IELTS Explained. Okay. So guys, I think we're good to take a look at some of your questions now. My screen is freezing quite a lot, so I might not see your comments, but I'll do my best to read out the questions for Annelie. Okay, so let's see. First of all, a question is from Amy, who's asking about the when you're describing a relationship with someone in part 2, you know, what kind of things should you discuss or should you describe? Should you say how they look? You know, what their influence was? What kind of information should you give when you're describing a person, and particularly like the kind of relationship that you have.
Yeah, I think that the more information you give, the better. Basically, the examiner is just looking for 2 minutes of solid speaking while they're not speaking, so they can really assess your language. They really can get a good idea of it. It's quite hard. It's harder when you're interacting with the candidate. It's much easier. You can sit back and listen to 2 minutes. So, the more you say, the better. You can definitely describe how they look. Describe their character as well. I think with the relationship, what's good to do is to give examples. So if you're going to say, that you were very close-knit, then explain how you were close-knit. What did you do together? What kind of ways did you spend time together? If he was very strict, give some examples of when he was strict, talk about one specific time, something like that. So, detail, detail, detail. That's the most important thing. It's not so important what you say, but it's the fact that you give lots of detail that the examiner can then assess.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add to that, if you see on the card, one of the bullet points, talk about your relationship, and you just think, well, I don't know how to answer that. That's fine. You don't need to cover all the points on the card. So they're there to help you, but it's not essential that you mention all of them. So don't feel like you need to cover everything on the card. You can skip any of the bullet points. And that, I think, helps to answer your question, Christabel, which is, must we answer the points in part 2 in order?
Yeah, you don't have to, like Jamie just said, they're there to help you. It's not that kind of task. You can completely ignore the bullet points, to be honest, as long as you are, answering the question, as long as you're talking about that topic, you can really just go with the flow and answer it how you want to. This is why taking the notes and having the headings or the mind map really, really helps, because it gives you a lot of detail. Yeah. And in fact, the bullet points, they can be quite unhelpful, because sometimes people just answer the bullet points and then they're done in 30 seconds, and then, they've got to keep thinking of something. So really, I wouldn't focus on that. I would focus on what you can say on that topic, and anything you can say. Sorry, Jabber, I'm hungry too.
Yeah.
Anything you can say is, is helpful, is relevant, is going to, give the examiner something to assess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also addresses your question, Coco, which is, do we have to answer all of the points? I've heard it's okay if the time is up and we haven't finished talking about all the points. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Just when the examiner stops you, don't worry if you haven't finished all of the points. You don't need to cover all of them. Okay, it's just about the time, 2 minutes.
Just keep talking.
And yeah, Sandkalp, do we need to keep speaking and wait for him to stop us? Yes, that is the best plan. They will stop you after 2 minutes. So just keep going. Please don't stop before they stop you, because they might think that you can't continue, and that could affect your score. Okay. Excellent. Let's see. Jabber, I can see your question here about how can we put together the most important words and adjectives. I guess this has to do with collocation, maybe. How can you learn what the best kind of collocations, combinations of words are? Any suggestions there, Annelie, for how to do that?
Yeah, I think finding things in context is always great. So, reading articles, finding collocations, finding the way that native speakers put adjectives and nouns together, or verbs and nouns together. There are also some websites. There is one called Just the Word, which actually you put in one word like impact, and they will give you all of the adjectives that work well with impact, all of the verbs that work well with impact. And that's a really, really good resource as well. And then you have to try and produce it. You've got to use it. You've got to make it active and not passive. So it's kind of find it, study it, use it, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And Annie, just to add for your question, if you look for the academic word list as well as just the word, that can help you to develop your vocabulary, okay, appropriate vocabulary for IELTS. Excellent. Let's see, Ashmit has a question here, which is, hey, I have many problems in writing task 2. Would you please help me? Ashmit, without seeing an example of your writing, it's difficult to give you specific feedback. So one option is for you to use our writing evaluation service, which is available on our website. We can review your writing and give you specific feedback on that, okay? Another option is to take a look at our live lessons on our YouTube channel. We have previous sessions on writing task 2, and hopefully that can help you address some of the issues that you have. I've put the link to that in the chat, Rodis. So if you go to IELTSonlinetests.com, do you mean just the word? Yeah, if you type in just the word.com, you should find it there, okay? And I saw a question there about the recording for this webinar. It will be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow as well. So you should be able to watch it then. Let's see, we've got time for a few more questions, guys. So we'll go ahead with these. Question here from Mahi about handwriting in the paper-based test. Are you judged on handwriting?
No, I mean, it would have to be very, very bad for it to cause a problem. I mean, if it's completely illegible, if the examiner cannot read what you've written, you know, then you get a 0 because they can't. But that's incredibly rare. And examiners do try really, really hard to understand all types of handwriting. They're used to all types of handwriting. They're also used to people crossing things out and, you know, doing arrows to other bits that they've decided to add in. So, you know, it's very unlikely to you know, have an influence on your score unless it's just impossible, in which case you probably need to work on it then.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Let's see, good question here from Wasif. If anybody has a stammer problem, like a speech impediment, what should the tips be for them? How can they speak fluently and have a good score in speaking?
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you have a speech impediment, you should get something from your doctor, okay? You can give that in when you register for the IELTS. They will take that into consideration. You know, anything which is an obstacle to you doing the test, which is not related to your language, you know, you need to tell the test center that, and then they will make provision for that. But they do need to have proof. So you do need to have some kind of note or something from a doctor for them to take it into account. But they will definitely take it into account.
Yeah, just make sure you let them know before the test day. Okay, excellent. Let's see. Artyom is asking, what if I'm naturally a slow talker? Will that affect my score?
It shouldn't. You know, the thing is, a lot of people speak too quickly, and that's actually very bad because it's very hard to follow somebody who is speaking quickly. If you speak at a steady pace, okay, if you're speaking evenly, if you're not pausing to look for words or to look for grammar, then, you know, that's just your natural way of speaking, and the examiner will understand that. And I don't think that would have any kind of negative impact. I'm speaking quite slowly myself now. I think, you know, if you're doing a job interview, you speak quite slowly. It's actually easier for the examiner to follow what you're saying if it's, you know, very steady. But without pausing to look for grammar or vocabulary, that's what they pick up, and that's when you lose marks in the fluency and coherence.
Yeah, exactly. Great, guys. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up very soon, so we might not get round to all your questions in this session. Just to let you know that you can add them as comments on our YouTube channel, and we do check them and respond to comments on our YouTube. So if we don't get round to answering your question today, head over to our YouTube channel, put your comment as a question, and we will reply to you that way. Okay, so apologies if we didn't answer your questions, but we did have a lot to get through. It was a very busy session tonight. So I hope you found it helpful. Just like to say very big thank you to Annelie for presenting on today's topic. Thanks very much, Annelie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for everything. Thanks for hosting. Thanks, guys, for taking part. You had some great answers there. Okay, good luck, those of you who've got your test coming up.
Yeah, definitely, guys. For all of you, it seems like a lot of you have your tests coming up soon. So best of luck to you. We do have a number of other sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks. From next week, there will be a time change in the UK. So our sessions are going to be 1 hour later than usual, if I've calculated this right. But if you check the website, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's later. But if you check our website, the correct time will be on there. Okay, but you'll notice it's a bit of a different time from usual. But we hope you can make it for that. Okay, so thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully see you again soon. So
bye,
cheers,
guys.
guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Jabba. Go and get your food, quick.
Yep, totally. Cheers, Annelie. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.